Good morning again, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. Today, June the 15th, 2018, we celebrate the life of and remembering Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Across this world, and especially this nation, communities of conscience pause to commemorate, acknowledge, and reflect on a man of conscience, none other than Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Dr. King was a phenomenal visionary and probably the greatest leader of our time. He was responsible for raising America's consciousness toward injustices. Not only was America's consciousness raised, but he forced the establishment to look at the hypocrisy of our country. Dr. King understood that the Declaration of Independence clearly said one thing, but it was widespread practices was in total conflict with what was stated. And that was that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As many of you may know, that I am associate minister at New Bridge Baptist Church in Henrico County. It's actually the church that I grew up in and live in. It's in the same community that I once lived in Eastern Henrico. This past weekend, I had the privilege of eulogizing a 91-year-old man who lived in that community, and his family, and I have been friends for years. That gentleman saw nearly a century of progress for civil rights, yet we are still fighting for those same civil rights. He often described one night when I would talk with him over the years with passion, the terror he felt as a survivor of a bombing of the grocery store in our community. The economic impact on the neighborhood was devastating. The bombing of the only Black-owned grocery store in my community struck fear in the hearts of everyone who lived there. That night, the explosion woke the community up. This happened in the 60s. And as the grocery store was bombed, the only place that we would go for miles, because at that time African Americans were not allowed to go everywhere they wanted to do the things that they did, just to have the essentials. This was the evil work of the KKK. Not only did they bomb the store, but they burned crosses as well. It was terror in that Black community of only 3 streets. And I still remember the fear in my father's eyes and the frightening experience for our communities. I had sort of forgot about those things over the years. You think about them every now and then. But I was forced to begin to think about it a lot as we have had to deal with some of the things that Dr. King has certainly fought against. That experience of many of the things that we had to deal with back in the 60s and 70s, unfortunately, we're having to relive them. Today, we are reliving some of the same racially charged mistreatment and indignities. Today, there's a narrative of intolerance and ignorance that feed into a culture of privilege, a culture that breeds the bombing and the burning of Black churches, a culture that led to the senseless death of a young woman, Heather Heyer, and 2 of Virginia's finest Virginia State Police pilot, Lieutenant H.J. Cullen and Trooper Burke M.M. Bates, last summer in Charlottesville. And even today, last week, I guess many of us said, as we listened to the President of the United States, it's his continual efforts to nurture the seed of ignorance, bigotry, in an attempt to morally bankrupt not just the highest office in this nation, but the nation itself. This is what Dr. King fought against. We cannot and should not allow and should not be a part of and should speak up loudly against anyone that feel it's okay to dehumanize another. When he talked about the Haitians and African nations, and a word that I refuse to repeat, period, I realized that millions of some of those folks that he talked about were enslaved Africans who were brought to this land to help build a perfect union we call America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, and the American dream where every U.S. citizen should have an equal opportunity to achieve success and prosperity through hard work, determination, and initiative. Dr. King's dream and every man's dream should be for every man to be created equal and be treated equal. And so I'm asking my colleagues, and I'm sure some of you have, just to condemn this kind of ideology, to condemn this kind of thought that it's okay to dehumanize and demean others. We owe one another the right to love them and to accept them as they are. Not even to tolerate people, because I often tell others, when I tolerate someone, I tolerate based on a relationship. I tolerate my children, whether they decide to wash the dishes or not. But I want to accept each human being as an individual that God has created and that's made in God's image and likeness. And so I would not sit back and allow anyone to subjugate people to oppressive through an oppressive system. So today, as we elevate Dr. King on his birthday, let us contemplate the multitude of decisions before us. And there are many, such as the opiate crisis, education, the food desert and food insecurities in Virginia, the necessity for Medicaid expansion, veterans support, job creation, housing, and other anti-poverty initiative. And through the spirit of Dr. King's vision, let's work together in a bipartisan fashion. Many of our colleagues have promised that we will work together, and I hope that it's the truth that that's exactly what we will do, to support one another and vote to build the beloved community that Dr. King has visualized. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your words on last week, and thank you, Delegate Ware, for your words last week. I know as one individual that I'm going to do everything I can to help make Dr. King's dream become a reality, but also make some realities for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So in closing, I want to use these words from one of my favorite songs, and some of you may be familiar with it, by James Weldon Johnson, and to say it in the honor of Dr. King. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, and ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening sky, and let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of faith that the dark past hath taught us, and sing a song full of hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun, let a new day begun, and let us march on until victory is won for all mankind. God bless and thank you.
Mr. Speaker, members of this august body, I stand today to recognize the drum major for justice. I stand today to recognize the drum major for peace, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Dr. King made many contributions for positive change, but most importantly, he pricked the consciousness of our nation as well as this Commonwealth. We can all remember, if you will, Dr. King so eloquently penned and spoke in reference to sleeping through a great revolution. He pricked our conscience because he said we should not sleep through a great revolution. He reminded us of a story that we're all familiar with, and that is in Rip Van Winkle. He said that Rip, on his way up to the mountains to sleep for 20 years, stopped and looked at a sign that had a picture on it. And there it had a picture of King George III. He went up during this revolution and slept for 20 years, only to discover as he came down after he woke up, on that same sign was a picture of George Washington, the President of the United States. He had slept through a revolution. Dr. King reminds us to remain in a state of consciousness of what's going on in and around us each day, doing whatever we can to put a shoulder to the wheel to positively change society. Many of those issues that end up shifting what society and where society is does not roll in, as he reminds us, on the wheels of inevitability. It comes from the hard work of conscious individuals willing to labor in the best interests of our brothers and sisters. He reminded us also that it behooves us to do so because we are all inextricably bound together, and that I can't be all that I can be unless you are all that you can be. And you can't be all that you can be unless I can be and have the opportunity to be all that I can be. That is what Dr. King reminded us of. He pricked our conscience on a number of issues. And I believe that issues of the day, which were mentioned before by Delegate McQuinn, are extraordinary and extremely important, that we look at the social issues of the day and be reminded that we really are going through a great revolution. This issue, and I'm going to just point to one right now, of health care and Medicaid expansion across the country and here in the Commonwealth, is a very important issue of our time. I believe we are going through a great revolution. It behooves us to look across to see our brothers and our sisters and understand that, yes, we are inextricably bound together. As we look at the blood, sweat, and tears of conscious workers all around us bringing about change, it's important for us to wake up. A revolution is going on, and more today, Virginians approve of better health care for our brothers and sisters. Over 70%. It doesn't matter which party. It does not matter what geographic region we represent. The numbers show that Medicaid expansion is something that Virginians want. Let us remember, as a gentleman of the 77th House District, in which I hail and have great deference and respect for, the late Dr. Hugo Owens shared with me as he put pen to a napkin and wrote that one man or woman awake can awaken another. The second can awaken his or her next door brother. But the three of them awake can make such a fuss that finally it awakens the rest of us. One man or woman awake with dawn in his or her eyes multiplies. May we never falsify or forget the contributions and the sacrifices of Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.